So, Mark, how did Enys Men all come about? Because I love this folk horror subgenre, and this is well choreographed, and the cinematography in here is awesome. So, how did this story all come about?
It was off the back of the previous film that I'd made, which called Bait, which is coming out in the States with Enys Men, and we'd had relative success with that film, and we won a BAFTA in early 2020 for it. And by then we were sort of discussing what was going to be next. And that film, people when they were reviewing it and talking about it said it almost felt like a horror film, and I couldn't really understand why people were saying that. So I thought, but I took it as almost like an invitation to make a horror film. So I thought that would be fun to, I love horror, and I thought, well, maybe we should do a genre film next. Do it the same kind of scale, the same cast and crew, similar kind of schedule, get it done quickly, get it out there before we think too much about what that difficult second film is going to be. But I wrote it, and I kind of read it back after I'd wrote it and thought, it doesn't feel like a horror film. Screenplay didn't feel like a horror film. And then I realized that the horror is more in the form, is in the way that I work with the picture and the sound, which then made sense why people thought that the previous film Bait felt like a horror film, because I use 16 millimeter, and with Bait I hand process the negative, I post sync all the sound. There's a kind of disconnect between sound and picture. I edit in quite a non-linear way, and I thought, well, I don't need necessarily a horror script to make a horror film. So obviously the script for Enys Men was lent into horror much more than Bait did, but it still wasn't an overtly horrific story. And so we were ready to go in and shoot in spring 2020, and then the pandemic came along. So we were put on hold for a year, and I went away. Well, I didn't go away anywhere, actually. I stayed at home and wrote another screenplay, and then a year later came back to Enys Men, and we shot it. And I think it was influenced in a lot of ways by what we'd been through in the pandemic. I'm only realizing that now, but I did a quick rewrite before we shot it at the end of the lockdown. And obviously a lot of the pandemic experience crept into the film, I think. But yeah, that's how we got there, trying to make something that was similar to Bait in terms of its scale and ambition, and not to kind of overreach ourselves too much too soon, but lean into this genre and have a bit of fun.
Right. And how did the casting process come about for Enys Men? Because Mary, right? Is that her name?
Yeah. Mary.
Yeah, Mary was fantastic in this as well. So how did everything come about from the casting process for Enys Men?
Well, Mary's my partner, and
okay.
I wrote the film for her originally, and then I got very conscious that it might be, and she's in Bait as well. She's this kind of secondary character in Bait. I became a bit worried that I might get accused of nepotism if I'm just writing a lead for my partner. Right. So then we went through a really long casting process where Mary almost became the de facto casting director, because she was suggesting people that she knew and peers of hers as possible people to play the volunteer. But it got to the stage where I just, I admitted to myself that I'd written the part for her, and I couldn't really see anybody else in that part except for her. So I remember I said to my agent and Denzel Monk, the producer, I said, I think it should be Mary. And they were both like, oh, thank God you've said that, because they were waiting for me to say that, but they knew that I had to go through this process of deciding myself that Mary was right. But she was always right. I know it's a cliche. Everybody says, oh, I can't imagine the film with somebody else in it, because once it's finished, you can't imagine the film it as being different in any way. But I do really think that we'd probably still be shooting the film now if it wasn't Mary, because we've got a real powerful shorthand in the way that we work. She knows what I want. I know what she's capable of, and we can both kind of push each other in that way. And she's a theatre actor by trade. She's just up the road here now at the moment, just rehearsing a new one-woman show that she's doing. And so in theatre, you know, normally she relies on words and gesture and physicality to communicate. And the way that I work, there's few words, not many gestures. And so everything that she's got going on internally in terms of building a character can't come out physically, so then comes out of her eyes, you know, the window to the soul, which I think is where that sort of powerful performance comes from. But I knew it was a huge responsibility because she carries the whole film. And I tried to tell her all the way through that if the film was successful, it would be down to her. And if the film wasn't successful, it would be down to me, because film really isn't an actor's medium in terms of control. You know, and I think with theatre, the actors are effectively the editors. They create the final version that the audience see. They can change stuff. You know, director can't. He's got no control over the show once the curtains go up. But with film, you know, I can ruin a performance in an edit very easily. So I did say to Mary, you know, there shouldn't be any pressure on you. You know, you'll get the credit if this film works, and I'll get the flack if it doesn't work.
Kind of funny how that happens, right? But I like the way that you put it in that editing kind of sense. And that I never heard that before. So that's really interesting, the way you put that.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's like theatre is much more of a writer's medium as well, and an actor's medium. And I sometimes think, you know, if you're an actor, why don't do films? Which you know, I'd say if I was an actor, it might be because I'm a bit of a control freak. But I was thinking, if I was an actor, I'd do theatre. I wouldn't do films. I wouldn't let somebody else have the control over my performance in an edit. I want complete control over it. But that's probably, you know, that's me, and that's a shortcoming of me, because I think you know, great film actors, they have an intuition of who to work with, and they trust the directors and the writers and their co-stars that they're working with. But I do think it's kind of terrifying for an actor to turn up. You know, I hear the actors when they're doing like a press junket, and they may be, you know, following the premiere of a film, and they're like, the first time they saw it was the night before they're doing the press.
Right.
And you think, oh my God, you know, what a moment that must have been when they went into the theatre and saw the film for the first time with an audience. Just think, oh, you are suckers for punishment.
Yeah, that has to be kind of terrifying and exhilarating, right? Any moment you get like that.
Yeah, I think that must be it. I think they must find it exhilarating rather than kind of horrifying. But I would be on the horrifying side.
Yeah, I think I would too. I think I would like walk out here and there a little bit.
Yeah, because you know, I know that in an edit, it's like you're a world builder. You're effectively the god of the world that you're creating in the film, and you can tweak stuff and change stuff, and you've got all of this control. And I just think giving up that control is scary. You know, I'll see a shot maybe from our dailies that I'll think, you know, and everybody go, oh, that's not very good. And I think, yeah, but that will cut with that. And then if I put that sound on it, that moment's going to be fantastic. And other people will look at something and go, oh, it's an amazing scene. That's, you know, brilliant bit of performance. And I'll think I'll just think that's not going to work in the film. You know, we had a scene in Enys Men between Mary's character and Ed's character, who plays the boatman, where they're trying to start the generator after he turns up with the fuel. And we had this scene which was a 2-shot of the two of them trying to start the generator together. And when we shot it, everybody thought, oh, that scene was amazing. It was kind of quite funny and it was quite touching. And even I was like, yeah, what a scene. You know, that's going to be in the trailer, that scene. And we had a little break. Everybody had a cup of tea, and we all patted ourselves on the back and congratulated ourselves on how great we were. As soon as I got into the edit, I was like, no, that scene doesn't work. It's from a totally different film. You know, so you just don't know. You don't know because the edit and the control you have in the edit is ultimately where the film's made, and you just don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work until that moment, I don't think.
Well, Mark, what is next for you after Enys Men? Do you have anything lined up right now?
Yeah, we've got like I said, during the lockdown, when everything kind of ground to a halt, I got a development deal to write a new screenplay, which was amazing, really, because I started writing it when all the cinemas were closed, and I didn't know whether they were going to ever open again. I didn't even ever know whether we were going to be allowed out of our houses again. So I wrote it with real freedom, I think subconsciously I thought this film's never going to get made. So I just right. I can write it with complete freedom, and now it looks like it is going to get made and it's going to be shot next year. So I'm gradually having to turn it into something that was very fanciful and huge into something that I can actually make. And it's another genre film. It's kind of a time travel horror thriller. We're between titles at the moment. It was called Gavennic of Paul, which is a Cornish. Gavennic is a Cornish word which features in Enys Men, which means hope. And it was called Gavennic of Paul, which means hope of Paul, and Paul is the place where I live. So it was very much a sort of on message for the COVID lockdown, writing a film called The Hope of Paul. The title was going to change, but it's a time travel film set within the fishing industry. I think it was described the other day as a cross between Quantum Leap and The Perfect Storm, which I think
you can take my money right now on that one.
I mean, I think the Perfect Storm reference is, I think, slightly bad taste, but it's about a boat, a boat that sinks, but it's a fishing boat that sinks, but it's got an overarching time travel element that means that ultimately all is not lost.
Well, Mark, congratulations on Enys Men, and nice meeting you today, and keep me updated on your other films that are coming out.